Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock and it's time for a wonderful webinar. My name is Rob Layton. I'm the Executive Director of the iMission Institute, and we're very pleased to have you join us today. This is the third in a series of major gifts, major donor webinars. The first webinar we had was pretty interesting. It was about planned giving and how you tap into how nonprofits, small, medium, large, tap into the 30 trillion, and that's with a T, trillion dollars of baby boomer wealth that will be starting to transfer now, and will be transferring over the next few decades. In the second webinar, we swung the pendulum, and we talked about how to use social media and online social networks to capture, well, really to get high net worth individuals to turn on online their high net worth networks to raise substantial amounts of money. The tools of Giving Days and the tools of peer-to-peer fundraising, how you use those with major donors to raise as much as $60,000 in a single day, or over $1 million in a 30-day period. Those webinars are now in the process of getting edited, and they'll be up on our site on imissiontraining.org, available for free in the future. In 2018, we'll be having another collection of free webinars, both on broadly fundraising and developing relationships with major donors. But today is all about the heart of what we're doing, and I'm going to mix a metaphor here. We're talking about the hearts, but Ron Schiller will be talking about the minds of the major modern donor. Ron is an extraordinary individual. He has 2 books printed available on Amazon. On the topic, he is the founder and CEO of the Aspen Leadership Group, and he is the guy for the institutions that he has worked for. He has led development teams. He has raised billions of dollars for those organizations. So with that said, Ron, I'm going to welcome you in just 1 second, but for people who have questions, there is a question box in the lower right-hand corner. You can add questions to that, or Sarah, if you'd let folks know if they want to engage on Twitter.
Yeah, I will be live tweeting this webinar, some key takeaways, at iMission, INST, Inst for Institute. We're going to be using the hashtag major donor. So if you want to tweet about this webinar as it's going on, or follow along what other people are taking away, you can use hashtag major donor on Twitter.
Great. So with that, again, really pleased, really proud, really honored to have Ron Schiller present. Ron, welcome to the iMission Institute webinar.
Thank you very much, Rob, and it's delightful to be with all of you. I'm calling in from Aspen, Colorado, where it is snowing lightly, and we're happy about that. This time of year, we really need the snow, and we actually don't have quite as much as we normally would have, so we're glad to see it at least starting to snow a little bit today. So very pleased to speak with you today. What we're going to cover in the next hour are these things: defining major gift, just so we're on the same page about that. And then, what are today's major donors telling us? What can I do about that as a fundraiser, and fundraiser as in professional fundraiser or volunteer fundraiser or both? And then moving my organization from a solicitation approach to more of a partnership facilitation approach. So first of all, actually, I'll define major gift. Major gift varies, as we know, for organizations. In some organizations, $1,000 is a major gift. In other organizations, you don't start talking about major gifts until you're in the $50,000 or $100,000 range. But for the purposes of this discussion, we're really talking about the largest gifts that an organization raises and the largest gifts that philanthropists give. And the second book that I wrote, called Belief and Confidence, which is out, it was published by Case and it's available on Amazon.com. That was interviews with 50 leading philanthropists about what made their gifts most satisfying and most successful in their view. And I was talking with them about their largest gifts. For some of that for some of those donors, those gifts were in the 8 and 9 figures. For other donors, their largest gifts were in the 6 figures. In the people interviewed for that book. And the lessons, however, what I was trying to accomplish with that book, there are a number of books written by fundraisers, there are a number of books written by individual philanthropists, but living among so many highly generous, active philanthropists in the Aspen area who are active all around the world as donors, and then working with major donors over the course of now a 30-year career in fundraising, I was hearing a lot of the same things from them about what made gifts most successful or most satisfying, and by contrast, what made gifts less successful in their view. And I wanted to give voice to those donors, and particularly those common themes. And so after interviewing these 50 leading philanthropists and drawing on my own experience, I put forward, largely in their own words, some of which we'll touch on today, what they were thinking and what they were saying about their major gifts. The next book that I wrote, which is going to be coming out in a few months, also published by Case, is called Raising Your Organization's Largest Gifts. And we're going to touch on, again, some of those lessons today, but really, again, aimed at whatever a donor defines as the largest gifts they're going to make, and whatever an institution defines as the largest gifts it's going to raise. There are a lot of things we can learn about how we work with donors in making their largest gifts and how we position our organizations to raise whatever the 10, 20 largest gifts that we raise are going to be. And what I found in doing research for that third book is that the 10 largest gifts today that any organization raises, whether those are in the thousands of dollars or in the millions or in the tens of millions of dollars, the 10 largest gifts are representing for most organizations somewhere between 1/4 and 3/4 of the total that they raise in any given year, just 10 gifts. And so these major gifts, again, however we define them in terms of scale for our organizations, our largest gifts really matter, and making them as large as possible has a great impact on the degree to which we can fulfill our missions and proceed with our strategic objectives. So that's definition of major gift. Then we're going to cover what are today's major donors telling us, what can I do, and moving my organization from solicitation to partnership facilitation. So just a little bit about me. Founding partner of Aspen Leadership Group. Aspen Leadership Group is now the largest search firm in the country in this space. We're handling more development and advancement searches than any other firm in the country. We are different from most other search firms in that everybody who is a senior consultant for us has at least 20 years of experience in fundraising leadership. Most of us were vice presidents multiple times. And so we're approaching search from a sort of larger talent, peer-to-peer kind of conversation about leadership and evolving leadership in the fundraising space. That is the core of what we do. We also do all kinds of other talent-oriented consulting relating to fundraising. And our searches are typically for development staff at all levels, plus presidents, CEOs, board members, anybody who has fundraising as a significant part of their position. As Rob mentioned, I did lead several billion-dollar-plus campaigns, including the $2.3 billion campaign at the University of Chicago, and I've been involved in now a lot of gifts, a lot of levels, including a couple of 9-figure gifts, the first 2 9-figure gifts that the University of Chicago had raised, and they've gone on to raise more since then. And we've talked already about the books. The third book, Raising Your Organization's Largest Gifts, is not out yet, but will be out this late winter or spring. So what are today's major donors telling us? One, they have thought about their philanthropy. They've thought about their philanthropy. 2, impact matters more than prior affiliation. 3, our timelines are not necessarily theirs, again, when it comes to the largest gifts that we're raising and the largest gifts that they're giving. Belief and confidence matter, and that's the title of my second book, Belief and Confidence, and it sounds a little bit like motherhood and apple pie. It's, of course, we all have to have belief and confidence, but when I started to peel back that onion and see all the different types of belief and confidence that donors and organizations needed to have for the highest level giving to thrive, it became clear that it's much more complex than initially meets the eye. And donors are willing to learn if we're willing to listen. So a key question is, are we open truly to partnership? So to start to dive into some of those areas, U.S. Trust does a study of high net worth philanthropy every other year. Always very interesting lessons that come out of that. They interview high net worth philanthropists, and that's defined as people with a net worth of $1 million or more. And they interview advisors, financial advisors to those philanthropists, and they ask a whole series of questions. And I'm going to touch on a couple of interesting findings from this last study, which came out last year. So first of all, the percentage of high net worth donors who have a specific strategy in place to guide their giving, a specific strategy in place. That number, when I speak around the country and ask audiences, I usually get a guess of somewhere around 5 or 10, maybe 20%. It's 48%. And in some years, a similar question has produced numbers even above that. What we regularly, I think, do to our detriment in too many organizations is begin by feeling as though we have to have all of the answers about what someone should support, that we need to figure out what proposals to put in front of them, articulate those proposals, and then meet with the donor to say, here's what we need and here's what we'd like to ask you to support. Here's what we think might be interesting to you. And I think we too often fail to begin with the donor and ask them the very respectful question, what are you and your family trying to accomplish with your philanthropy? And then how might we help? How might we find a match? We're often looking for matches, and I think we're all trained to look for matches, but I think too often, and my conversations with donors bore this out, too often we come to them asking about what they might like to do with our organization, rather than having that larger conversation about what they're truly trying to do with their philanthropy writ large. If we take the time to ask that question up front, we get so much good information that helps us put the right things in front of them and have much greater chance of having a successful philanthropic partnership emerge. But in any case, 48% have a specific, they report that they have a specific strategy in place. They have thought about what they're giving and where they want to give, especially their largest gifts. And philanthropists want impact. We're moving away, I would suggest, from a generation of joiners. These are people who joined the church and joined the country club and joined the alumni association and joined because that's what you did. That's what their grandparents did. That's what their parents did. That's what they did. And this generation, the baby boomers, started turning 70 last year. And so we're moving into a generation whose primary giving years are over the next 10 to 20 years. And they are a generation that is so much more interested in measurable impact and much less interested in that prior affiliation. So this is a great opportunity for organizations that don't have a natural built-in constituency, because donors want impact more than prior affiliation. But it's also a wake-up call for organizations that have too long counted on people who had that prior affiliation, and they are finding that they need to talk more specifically about current day impact rather than this sense of giving back or giving because you already have that affiliation. And one of the illustrations of this that donors point out all the time is that campaign goals, in their view, are increasingly becoming about a number rather than about impact. The arms race here, and we see it particularly in big higher education, where somebody did $1 billion campaign, some organization did $1 billion campaign, now they need to do 2 because the last one was 1, and then they're going to do 3 or they're going to do 4 because their peers just did 2, and so on. And this is true of arts organizations as well, where the numbers might be different but the idea is the same. And the original campaigns, or at least if you go back 30 or 40 years, campaigns were so much more focused on getting a group of regular donors, regularly engaged donors together to do one thing that was really important, to do a special thing, to reach and stretch and build that new building or hire that new person or launch that new program. And these days, at least again from the perspective of donors, and I do agree with them, we tend in too many organizations to start with a number. How much do we think we can raise? How much do we need? How much do we want to raise? How much does our president want to raise because she wants her campaign to be bigger than the last president's campaign? Whatever that might be, we're at risk if we make it about the number, or it feels to our donors as though it's about the number more than it is about the impact. Then our timelines are not necessarily theirs. And again, this is when it comes to the largest gifts that our organization needs and the largest gifts that individuals are going to make. The fiscal year really doesn't matter. Now, that's not to say that in annual giving, fiscal year doesn't matter. Of course it matters. And donors who know us well know how much it matters. But when it comes to the largest gifts, it's much more important to donors to get the gift right and to have it be a partnership that is reaching their objectives and reaching the organization's objectives than it is to worry about it falling into any specific fiscal year. And we can, I think, as fundraisers, too often fall into the trap of emphasizing that we're getting near the end of a fiscal year, we need your gift now, which is great for that $50 or $100 or even $1,000 or $10,000 annual gift, but not when it's going to come to the largest gifts we need and the largest gifts our organization can raise and needs to raise. And the other thing is, even campaign timelines for the largest gifts that people are going to make in their lifetimes and the largest gifts our organization is going to receive, if we're really honest with ourselves and look back at those gifts, fiscal year and campaign timelines are not typically motivators. Campaign timelines might help, but they are not going to be the principal motivator nearly as much as the impact and that shared objective. A couple of key findings to highlight that came out of the Belief and Confidence book. One is that the largest and most satisfying gifts were described by donors as self-solicited in most cases. So, in fact, in more than 90% of cases. Now, a lot of those donors are sophisticated fundraisers. They're sophisticated volunteers and board members. They understand that this does not mean we don't need a development staff or even a development committee of the board, but rather that the job of the development staff and the job of the president and the job of the board is to inform and to educate and to get to know the objectives of donors and to look how they might achieve those objectives by giving through this particular organization, making a really significant impact, having a significant impact on society. And that what these donors all said is when that relationship was there and when they came to making their largest gifts, they didn't really need to be asked. They knew enough about what needed to be done, and they knew enough about what they wanted to do that they described their gifts as either self-initiated or self-solicited. And the second key finding of the book was, as I mentioned earlier, that it's not as simple as just saying they believe in the organization, they have confidence, but many different types of belief and confidence are required. One of those types of belief is, frankly, just belief in philanthropy. Anybody who's worked in fundraising for a while knows perfectly well that wealthy does not mean philanthropic. And we spend, I would suggest, too much time chasing wealthy people and not enough time figuring out who is philanthropic, whether because of family training or family background, or because of religious reasons, or because of the example of friends or family members, or their own involvement in philanthropy. There are people who are philanthropic and there are people who are not. And we tend, I think, to have lists of people based on wealth capacity and maybe a little bit about inclination, but we spend too much time, I find, in a lot of organizations chasing those wealthiest people instead of chasing the people who are philanthropic. And another finding that relates to that in the book is that our standard measurement of saying take 5% of someone's known net worth and sketch that in as a possible campaign gift, That may be true generally across the board, but people who are truly philanthropic and deeply engaged with an organization have been known to give 10%, 20%, 30% of their known wealth to that organization. So the 5% might be a one-size-fits-all kind of quick and dirty measurement of what we might, how we might rank someone in our gift tables. But people who are philanthropic rather than just wealthy need a disproportionate amount of attention. And when we find them, they say things like this. This is a quote from the book, from a leading philanthropist. Other than supporting family, philanthropy is the most significant and beautiful thing we can do. We're privileged, and it's such a blessing, but it also carries an obligation, and we feel that profoundly. I think those of us who've had a chance to work with truly philanthropic people over many years understand that we really couldn't stop them from giving. They love giving. They want to give. The question is not whether they will give. The question is whether they will give to our organization. People also need confidence in personal circumstances, and there are a whole lot of them that are covered in the book. One of them that's obvious is financial circumstances. This is why we see major giving suffer when there is a general downturn in the economy. And it's because, regardless of how much wealth people have, it's because their confidence in financial circumstances is shaken. So I can think of one story of a friend who was working with a couple that had, on paper, a couple of $1 billion in wealth. And the gift under discussion was, quote unquote, only $5 million. And so this should not be a difficult gift for this couple to consider. But during the downturn, the last downturn, 2007, 2008, they lost, on paper, about half of that wealth. Their net worth in their overall holdings dropped to about $1 billion. And this friend of mine said to me, well, you know, they still should be able to move forward with that gift because they still have easily the $5 million. And my caution was, in their minds, they just lost $1 billion on paper. And they are really serious philanthropists who understand how much an organization is going to count on that $5 million commitment. And in their minds, they could lose another $500 million or even the rest of their money in the next month. People didn't know what was happening, and people are really lacking in confidence when there is a major downturn in the economy. And so organizations that were smart in this last downturn understood that, and they pivoted from asking for multi-year gifts to asking for 1 year at a time, because then donors' confidence was much higher in what they could do right now than it was in what they could do next month or next year. So confidence in financial circumstances has to be high. There are other things that can affect financial circumstances, such as a downturn in a business or a business sale that did not go as well as expected. Also, there are things people might not tell us about. There might be a divorce that's coming down the line that people don't want to talk about, but they're not sure how it will affect their financial circumstances, or a health scare. A lot of people won't talk about a health scare, but they're worried about how it will affect their financial circumstances. And then children and grandchildren, there are all kinds of things that we run into. And so understanding a person's context and the financial context and their level of confidence in their financial circumstances is really important. And if it's shaken, they may or may not know us well enough to tell us why it's shaken. They may just delay in moving forward with a major gift. I've mentioned business is another one, and all kinds of business concerns can affect someone's confidence in their circumstances and in their readiness to make a major gift. Family circumstances, again, touched on a couple of those, but all kinds of family dynamics can affect someone's confidence in moving forward with a major gift. Health, and a health scare can be a very big one, and that can last for a long time. And when someone's dealing with a major health scare, they are not thinking, oh, I've got to get back to Ron about that $100,000 proposal. They're focused on their health, their spouse's health, their family's health, whomever it might be, and that's going to mean that they're not going to be prepared to move forward. Again, regardless of what your fiscal year is, regardless of what your campaign timeline is, their focus right now is on their health. Privacy is another really interesting one. One of the largest gifts that I've ever worked on, we worked on for a couple of years, and right up until the last moment, we were not getting the signal that we could move forward, and there was a lot of hesitation and we didn't understand why. In this case, thankfully, we had such a strong relationship with the donor that the donor shared that suddenly, for the first time, people were going to understand the scale of this family's wealth because they were going to make such a large gift. And it was a privately held company. And so the donor and his wife were deeply concerned that their children might be kidnapped. And this was something that had never occurred to us. But that privacy issue around making a very large gift, we know perfectly well, and donors say all the time, if they start making large gifts, then every organization out there is going to notice, and now they're suddenly going to have a lot more interest and a lot more solicitations coming their way. But these privacy issues that are accompanying some very large gifts are have always caused some donors to prefer anonymity in making those gifts, but others to be really careful. And so we were able to help, knowing that, we were able to help this family by introducing them to other families who had dealt with a similar issue, and that eased their mind, and they were able to talk it through, and then they did move forward with making the gift with their name on it. So there are a variety of these personal circumstances. And the last one I'll touch on today is time. I had a quote from one of the donors who said this: "In 2007, I sold my bank and woke up a different person. My giving at major levels really started then. I had the money to give and the time to focus on where to give. It's not just about distributing money. I don't want to give without involvement." I heard this from so many donors. And even if you look back to Mega Gifts, written by Jerry Panis in the mid-'80s, he said that most of the largest gifts that people give are associated with board membership. In fact, I think he said in that book, all of them are. And I found that they are very closely associated with either board membership or a kind of involvement that mimics board membership. It's a very close kind of involvement where people can really understand everything they need to understand before making what is for them a very large gift. This person told me she had been criticized many times for having significant wealth but not giving it. And she said to me, "Ron, I worked very hard for that money. I didn't want to put any less thought into giving it away than I did into making that money. And I didn't have the time to do it when I was running my own business. But once I did have that time," and she has absolutely followed through, and she's one of the leading philanthropists in the country right now because now she has the time to focus. Another belief is belief in mission, and this may sound simple, but I would suggest, again, if we're really honest with ourselves, we have a number of major donors, potential major donors on our list who really are much more aligned with the mission of a different organization. So even though they may be wealthy and even though they may be philanthropic and truly generous people, if their strategy for giving, if their family's direction in giving is much more aligned with a different mission, then they may be generous with us to a degree, but they're not going to make the largest gifts in our organization. And that's okay. We need people who are supporting all different types of organizations in our communities to make our communities strong. What we need to find is the people for whom our organization can be a priority in their philanthropy, and again, focus disproportionately on them. Don't give up on the other people because their priorities may change over time. They will change over time, but focus disproportionately in terms of president's time, in terms of volunteer time, in terms of all kinds of other resources on the people who are philanthropic and whose philanthropic objectives align with the missions of our organizations. Because when we do, we find this kind of quote: "The festival is a truly special place." This was Kay and Matthew Buxbaum. Matthew Buxbaum speaking. Kay and I have long believed in it, especially the incredible students whose energy keeps classical music vital. We're so grateful that we're able to do this. And this was making the largest gift that they had ever made and the largest gift that the organization had ever received. and they were thanking the president for giving them the opportunity to do it because their objectives were so closely aligned with what the organization was doing. And by the way, they had been involved for over 50 years in the organization, and so they really believed in it. But they stepped forward with a gift that was more than 5 times anything that had been given before. So they stretched, and they didn't expect to stretch, but they stretched because they believed so deeply in the mission of that particular organization. Another type of confidence that's required is confidence in leaders. And one of my favorite quotes from the book was that 9s hire 10s, whereas 5s hire 4s. This is a really sophisticated donor's approach, somebody who's worked with a lot of different organizations, and we run into all of the time, those of us who've been in fundraising for a long time, a donor who might say, you know, I love the organization, but I don't really like that president, or I don't really agree with that dean, or I don't really agree with that program director or music director, whatever it might be. But this is a donor who looks even more deeply and is looking at the quality of leadership across the organization and looking at the people who report to the CEO. And he said to me, when I see a really strong leadership team, I know that I've got a president who is a secure person and is a strong leader, not an insecure person who hires weaker people. So that's the kind of confidence, not just in the top leader, but in, or the top leaders, president and board chair, for example, but confidence in many leaders throughout an organization. Another confidence that came up regularly is confidence in vision. So it's wonderful to have confidence in a particular leader, but people want also to have confidence in the vision of that leader and to make sure that they understand what that vision is, and again, that vision is aligned with their own vision and their own particular interests in their philanthropy. And one of, again, a great quote from a donor, almost all nonprofit organizations are run by well-meaning people, but we like to see that extra something that shows they can accomplish what they want to do. High energy, vision, and great courage. So these particular donors who are very active in San Francisco, Aspen, and other places, they say that what gives them confidence, not just confidence in the leader, confidence in the vision of that leader, is when they find a leader who is really just so deeply identified with the organization that they exude this idea that they live, breathe, sleep, you know, just love the organization. They know that their money is going to be well used in that situation. Another is confidence in strategy. So not just confidence in the leader and not just having a great vision for the organization, but do you have a plan? Are you clear? And strategy, over and over again, donors said to me, a strategic plan does not mean a list of everything everybody wants to do. A strategic plan means we have looked critically at what our opportunities are, what our challenges are, what our audience needs, what our constituency needs, and we have made hard choices. And what donors really appreciate is when they see what the strategic objectives are, but they also know what you left off. So that tells them that you have been really careful about prioritizing and putting forward, you know, the most important things. I often say that I have rarely in my career said no to a donor, but I have often said to a donor, you know, that is a wonderful idea for a gift, but that gift is not going to work here right now, and let me explain to you why. It's because we have set strategic priorities, we have aligned our resources, we are raising money from other people, we are putting our own resources toward these things that need to be done now. And while your gift may be a good idea 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's not where we're putting all of our other resources, and we're not going to make you proud of that gift. That's a very different kind of answer than no. It's still a no. It still means that we're not going to accept gifts that are not aligned with our priorities. But you know, I've had a lot of presidents and board members over the years say we can't let donors twist us into pretzels, and I absolutely agree. This is not about letting donor objectives force us into doing something that we don't want to do. It is about having a conversation and a dialogue in which we inform each other and educate each other and find shared objectives so that we can make a person's gift as successful as possible and really make them proud of that. Because if we can do that, then we know that we're going to have more and more gifts. But the first time that we don't do that, the first time we take that gift because we want the number, and then we don't make them proud of that because it really wasn't the right gift for us, is our last gift from that donor. This quote came from another really sophisticated donor family. They work primarily in Philadelphia and New York. They talked a lot about analysis, measurement of progress, that when they look at a proposal, they want to see measures built into the proposal. And what this the wife in this family said to me, if there's not a measure, how do we know whether we got there? How do we know whether we succeeded? How will the organization know that we've succeeded? And so they are really careful not to make, and they make lots of major gifts, but not to make major gifts to organizations that are not committed to data analysis and don't have a plan for measuring progress against plans. Another confidence. So again, I hope I'm getting across the idea here that it's not as simple as it seems, belief and confidence. Another is in financial planning and management. And this donor was very proud to report on how they're teaching their children and especially their grandchildren about giving. And that she told the story of her 12-year-old granddaughter coming back, having recommended to the family that they support a particular organization, and then going back and asking for a report on the gift that they had made and how that gift was used and what the impact was before they made another gift. And the granddaughter came back and said, they were not able to tell me, and I think that they wound up having to use part of our gift for something else because they didn't have good plans in place, and I would recommend that we hold off on making an additional gift. She was very proud of that moment in their discussion, but they talk about all the time there are organizations that are unfortunately not either using gifts as promised or not managing their finances well. Now, this is different from expecting an organization to be rich, right? Donors are involved because they know that funds are needed, so they're not expecting us to be running big surpluses. They know that there are challenges, financial challenges, but they do want to know that we're managing our resources well, and particularly the resources that they're entrusting to us. And they deserve, and they want to have a report on the impact of those gifts, again, particularly when it comes to these major gifts. While I had these philanthropists' attention, I asked them, and there's a section in the book, the second book, Belief and Confidence, that is called Philanthropist to Philanthropist. I basically said, okay, we're talking a lot about these different types of belief and confidence, but if you had, now that you've been involved as a philanthropist for a long time, you made lots of gifts to lots of organizations, if you had a room full of people who were just starting down the path of major giving, maybe they've given to some galas, bought some seats, maybe they've given to some annual funds, but now they want to be serious about their major gifts. What would you say to them? What are the key things you've learned that you would want to share with them? And their advice fell into three categories. Number one, find your passion. Every single one of them put that first. They basically said, when it comes to your major giving, don't follow the passion of your friends or your family or anyone else. Find your passion. That's what's really going to make you happy and satisfied, and where you'll have your best impact. The second thing they said is find your partner, and they used that word, and that was really interesting. It goes back to this point about philanthropists today wanting impact more than prior affiliation. What they were saying here is the university doing the work that you are interested in might not be the university where you went to school. It might be where your spouse went, might be where your child went, it might be the one down the street, it might be a different one altogether. Find the partner. The arts organization might not be the one you grew up with. The medical institution you want to support might not be the one where you were treated. The social services one might not be the one in your neighborhood. It might be a different one that is doing this work in a way that will take your gift the furthest, that will make you the most proud. Find your partner in getting done what you want to get done for society. And the third thing was get involved. And again, over and over and over again, I think the big challenge to us, and it's been true for a long time, is major giving. The largest gifts we raise are highly associated with board membership or with some kind of engagement or involvement that replicates that closeness to the organization. And it's becoming more and more true the larger the number of nonprofit organizations that are out there. And with this explosive growth in nonprofit organizations over the last 10 or 15 years, it's just even more so. We need, as organizations, to figure out how we give people a board quality kind of involvement for them to make, with confidence, their largest gifts to our organizations. So here's a quote from the book, just to share one on the passion concept. The donor said, "Give to your passion or you'll be disappointed in the outcome. Become an expert in your field of interest so you know what you want. Give in a way that's unique. You can be creative in ways that others can't." So again, this is how donors are thinking. They've thought about their philanthropy, and they're looking for an organization that is open to their thinking, open to their ideas, aiming for a partnership, not just, here we have all of the ideas, now please choose from this list of possible gifts. Find a partner who ascribes to your vision and values, who brings the most innovative ideas to the discussion, who can carry it through, who measures, right? Who knows when they get there. The right leader wants the right donor partner, and vice versa. Measure or you won't know if you've arrived. These are, again, all quotes from philanthropists. One of the most striking things to me was this. This was Ann Ziff, who is a really highly engaged philanthropist on many boards. She's given to many different organizations, and she brought this up. She said, you know, I've thought a lot about my philanthropy. I have plans for my philanthropy, but as we talk, Ron, you know, it's true. No one, no fundraiser, no president, no one has ever asked me what I'm trying to accomplish with my philanthropy. They've asked me what I'm trying to accomplish with my philanthropy in a particular organization, but they've never really asked me about my philanthropy. I think it's such a missed opportunity, and the quote from the book from Ann, most fundraisers don't think to ask. They miss an opportunity to gain valuable information. Taking the time allows for a better dialogue, more robust conversation, and when you can bring our visions together into alignment, some truly exciting things happen. This is the place where the largest gifts occur. So what are major donors telling us? They've thought about their philanthropy. Impact matters more than prior affiliation. Our timelines are not necessarily theirs, especially when it comes to their largest gifts. Belief and confidence in lots of different ways matter. And they're willing to learn if we're willing to listen. Are we open to partnership? You know, I will say part of the reason I wrote that second book was to help fundraisers, because we can know these things and we can say these things to our presidents and to our board members and to others involved in fundraising, but hearing it directly from the donor has a different kind of impact on delivering that message. And so part of the rationale for the book, part of the reason for the book, was to give these donors a voice and to allow fundraisers to share what donors are saying with those who are leading various organizations. So there's an idea for you, and I also would say that if you're running into a roadblock in trying to communicate some of these messages, find one of your own donors and look at the history of people who've given to the organization. I think you'll find that a lot of these things are true, and those donors will often be willing to talk about how they came to decide on a very large gift to your organization. And I would be surprised if it were not along these lines. So what can I do with all of this information? Positioning for partnership. This goes to another part of the book which deals with belief and confidence, not on the part of donors, but on the part of organizational leaders. My friend Kurt Simic, who was many years the head of the foundation at Indiana University, added this quote, that donors are usually the easiest when it comes to site raising. Getting an organization's leadership to raise their sites to have true belief and confidence in large gifts must be accomplished first. I have found this over and over and over in my career, that it is a confidence level on the part of institutional leaders in larger gifts that that usually holds us back. I could tell story after story, and I do in the book, about how we raised to higher gift levels, ranging from the Salt Bay Chamber Music Festival, where a top gift was $1,000 and now it's $2,000 or $5,000, to the University of Chicago, where a top gift was $5 million and now it's several $100 million, and everything in between. It is almost always true that organizational leaders did not believe that those larger gifts were possible. And believe me, if they don't believe it, if you don't believe it, donors are not going to go there first. They need the confidence of organizational leaders to step forward with these gifts. So organizational leaders believe that the organization is worthy of philanthropic investment. Donors scale their gifts. And time again in my consulting work, I find that organizations list their top giving opportunities at levels that are lower, and they basically position themselves for a lower level gift. This was true at Carnegie Mellon. When I came in the previous campaign, I was asked the question, why did our wealthiest donors top out at $1.5 million in general for their largest gifts, when they could have given, and in some cases did give, to other organizations $5 and $10 million gifts? Well, in all of the campaign literature for that previous campaign, the top giving opportunity listed was $1.5 million. And so donors were receiving the message that for us, $1.5 million is a very large gift. And so I think too often we lower sights inadvertently. Then belief and confidence in the organization's strategy and planning, not on the part of donors, but on the part of institutional leaders, and belief, ability to inspire that belief in others. Again, it starts with those institutional leaders. Belief and confidence in each other. If that doesn't exist, donors can see it, smell it a mile away, and they will hesitate to make a gift in an organization where the leadership doesn't believe in each other, and particularly confidence in the present CEO and the present Chief Development Officer needs to be high and perceived to be high. And if it's not, donors will often gravitate to other organizations. Confidence in donors as philanthropic partners. To really, truly be open to the ideas of donors, to learn what their objectives are, not, again, to allow it to twist us into something we're not or cause us to do something we shouldn't do, but to deeply engage those ideas and those objectives, because when we can find a shared objective, we're going to raise much larger gifts. And then finally, the other types of belief and confidence listed in the book, and there's a chapter on each of these, so I won't go into detail, but staff throughout the organization. Hire people with belief in the mission. Hire people who have confidence in organizational leaders. If they don't have it, help them develop it. Confidence in plans and goals. If there's some reason they don't have it, make sure that they do. Because again, donors will have relationships. The more they get involved, the more relationships they will have. And if they perceive that this confidence is weak, then it will hold them back on having confidence to make a large investment. This is a quote that illustrates that. The best nonprofit managers and staff members I've known, says a board member and major donor, have a deep personal connection with the mission. They relate to the passion of board members. She was saying they don't need to know as much as I do about the mission, but they need to relate to my passion. That makes it much more interesting for the donor. And one of my favorite quotes from the entire book that really illustrates this point that we may not need to ask, but we may not even have the opportunity to ask, is this quote from Dennis and Connie Keller. Most of our gifts have been self-investigated and self-initiated. The best way that has the happiest reverberations for philanthropists and organizations is to encourage deep engagement through which philanthropists figure out what they want to do based on their core beliefs and, very important word, informed desires to help. So our role is to engage, inform, educate, involve, and in many cases, people who are going to make the largest gifts to our organizations will be engaged, involved enough that they will have the confidence to move forward and even make a gift that they, whether it or not any solicitation was mentioned, they will think of that gift as having been self-initiated. So what is our role? Our role is facilitator, to build relationships with individuals, to allow us to get to know what they value, and for them to get to know the values of our institutions. That's a very different role than solicitor. And those values all come into play in these relationships. not just the values of our organization. What can I do? Start with the donor. Ask them what they want to accomplish. Ask them how to ask them. Ask them how to thank and recognize them. People who are active philanthropists, again, it's not a question of whether they're going to give, it's a question of whether they're going to give to you. And they want that partnership, at least those who are going to make the largest gifts. And they find, in my experience, great respect in asking them how to ask them, asking them where to ask them, asking them when to ask them, all of those things, making it a dialogue and a partnership rather than surprise, right? You know, now we're going to spring a gift solicitation on you. And what's the first question? Have you met our new president? Have you seen our new facility? Have you heard about our new exciting strategic plans? Or perhaps, what are you trying to accomplish with your philanthropy and how might I help? When I train major gift officers, I say this all the time. It's such an easy question. It's such a respectful question. And it's something that people really would like to talk about. The worst scenario here, the worst case scenario is someone says, hey, I haven't really thought about that, right? Or they're not prepared to answer the question. But they're not going to get upset by that question. And we're going to learn, we stand to learn so much by starting there. And it flatters someone. It calls them a generous person. It calls them a philanthropic person. Use language that supports philanthropic partnership. Talk about shared objectives. Again, focusing on impact rather than on need. I think most of us have heard the expression for development that people who are making major gifts, they're much more motivated by meeting needs than by giving to organizations that have needs. So it's about shared objectives, meeting needs, rather than need. And yet, all the proposals I see, the solicitations I see, they tend to emphasize this word need, 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 need. We're not needy organizations. We're organizations that meet needs, and we partner with philanthropic people in order to meet those needs. And then to talk about mutual benefit versus indebtedness. And we can only do that if we really understand what motivates our donors. Here's one of our closest friends, one of the leading supporters of the arts in the world. And she said, my support of the arts has allowed me to meet amazing people who enrich my life. I learn a lot from them. It's great fun to be with them. This is a person, I promise you, you could not stop her from giving to the arts. She loves it. The question is not whether she will give. The question is whether she will give to a particular organization. That saying thank you, going back to what we can do, saying thank you is only a start. And if you think you've thanked enough, thank one more time, because we can never thank enough. Gratitude first, but results. This is what donors are looking for. They want to have impact with the gift. They either made that money themselves and they know how hard they worked for it and they want it to work in your organization, or they inherited it, and if it doesn't work, they feel guilty about it. They want results. That's what donors are looking for today. So of course they want us to thank them, but the best way, they say, that we can thank them is to make the gift work. Another quote, organizations and philanthropists need to measure and deliver on promises. Philanthropists should and will cut off programs and organizations that don't work and move on to something that does. Now, another thing that's very important that a lot of donors said to me, it's not that we wouldn't have been open to an additional discussion. So a lot of them said to me, you know, I made a lead gift 5 years ago, and nothing has happened, or I haven't heard anything. They haven't broken ground. They haven't moved forward with that program. They haven't come back to me to tell me what's going on. I guess they're too embarrassed to tell me that they haven't made it. And a lot of donors said to me, you know, we all go into these fundraising initiatives with great intentions. I made the lead gift not because I wanted to give $1 million out of the $2 million that they needed to raise, but because I wanted that initiative to happen. And if they had come back to me and said, you know, we really tried, we talked to lots of people, we only got 700,000 more, I would have given them the rest, they said, if they had come back to me, because I wanted that to happen. But they were too embarrassed to come back, or they were focused on the number more than they were on understanding that this was a shared objective. So it's not that it is always going to work, but it's important that we measure, and it's important that we report back. Treat people like partners. They know that things happen, they know things go wrong, they know things, you know, change in the lives of other prospective donors. They know all of that, but we fail too often to treat them like partners. So 2 views of philanthropy. One is the predominant view, I would suggest, moving money from those who have it to an organization that needs it. This is why we hear the joke all the time, you know, watch your wallet, Ron's coming into the room, etc. I'm sure you've all heard it, right? But that's one view of philanthropy. That's why people are scared of fundraising. But I have had so much joy in helping philanthropic people give that I'm not the least bit burnout. I'm, in fact, more engaged in philanthropy than I ever have been before, because my worldview from the very beginning, informed by some wonderful mentors, was that our job is to enable generous people to be generous, basically, to enable philanthropic families, corporations, people, foundations, etc., to give with confidence, help them do what they want to do. Now, they may, as they get more informed and involved and engaged, they may give more than they were thinking they were going to do, and that then we've done our jobs well. But they basically want to give, and our job is to help them give in ways that they will find satisfying, as well as successful, as well as, I would say, joyful. So back to U.S. Trust Survey, and this, I think, this point underscores it all. The principal factor that the donors gave in choosing a cause or a nonprofit organization to support, the #1 answer was personal values. That was the #1 factor in choosing where they were going to make their major gifts. And look at this, compelling pitch 6% of the time. And how much time do we spend on fancy 4-color brochures with just the right language to get, and sending in just the right person to ask, instead of starting with, what are you trying to accomplish and how might we help? The best way that has the happiest reverberations is to encourage deep engagement through which philanthropists figure out what they want to do based on their core beliefs and, again, informed desires to help. So I hope today we've covered defining a major gift, what are today's major donors telling us, what can I do about it, and then how do I change the framework, not just that the development staff and even the president is operating in, but the whole organization, in thinking about the fact that most of the nonprofit organizations in our country wouldn't even exist if it weren't for philanthropists. That's who started these organizations, and it's all about coming together, pooling our resources, pooling our intellectual resources, our track record, our reputation, our people, our, all of those things with the financial resources and the ideas and the passions and the commitment of the volunteers and the donors who give so much to organizations. This is what has always made nonprofit organizations thrive. When we become too professional or too sophisticated that we think we have all the ideas and all the solutions and donors should just give their money and go away, that's when we really lose. And if we really want to raise the largest gifts that our organization can raise, we need to think of ourselves, think of philanthropists as us, not have an us and them, but all of us together are getting amazing things accomplished for our communities and for society as a whole. Please keep in touch. I want to offer, as we draw to the end of the time here, that anybody is welcome to write to me. My direct email address is Ron Schiller, my name, RONSCHILLER, @aspenleadershipgroup.com. I'm happy to hear from any and all of you. And then also a resource that's out there that's free and confidential is the Philanthropy Career Network that we started as Aspen Leadership Group. That's philanthropycareer.net. Anyone can sign up for it. Gives access to the positions we're listing, gives access to the articles we write, books we write, all kinds of other resources. So I encourage you all to join. Also check out our website, aspenleadershipgroup.com, and then if you're interested in these books, that's the information. And the other book will be out, published by Case sometime this winter or spring, called The Largest Gifts Your Organization Raises, and it goes into a lot more detail than I was able to cover today about how we position our organizations to make our 10 largest gifts each year the largest that they can possibly be. So again, thank you so much for inviting me to take part and for joining us today. And I'll turn it back to Rob and see if we have any time for questions or if we'll just wrap up.
Yeah, Ron, I think we've got 2 minutes, so that's 2 minutes worth of added insight from an amazing set of insights. So thank you. That was really terrific. Jackie's thinking that major donors is really a team sport, and she's hearing that you speak to the involvement of folks other than the development staff in soliciting or partnering around major donors. Do you have any thoughts on how the organization embraces the process?
I would
Particularly, I
say,
guess, the
yes,
executive.
absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up. I would say that one of the key lessons that comes out of belief and confidence, and I hope comes across very clearly, is that every single person involved with an organization has the capacity to increase levels of belief and confidence in the donor community, and every single person working in an organization has the capacity to diminish that confidence. The person who greets someone at the front desk can raise levels of confidence in among donors in making large gifts, or they could diminish that confidence. A CFO who read the book responded to me that she told the story that working with her new president, she had come to understand that it was her job in giving financial reports not to change anything about the facts of what she was reporting, but she said, I have tremendous capacity either to present these with all the belief and confidence that I have in the organization to address some of our challenges, or without expressing my own belief and confidence. And that if I don't express my confidence, I could leave people with the impression that we're not going to be able to solve these challenges. And so I think everyone in the organization needs to understand their role. Every person can play a role. And donors, the more they get to know us, the more relationships they have, and they may never tell us that it was the person living next door to them or the person that they met at some event who said something to them that really decreased their confidence in going forward with a major gift. So I think that that's an extremely important point, and part of our jobs as fundraising staff members is to help people understand this idea of philanthropic partnership, and that we all play a role in raising levels of belief and confidence.
And one last question. We have a number of folks on the webinar that are in smaller to mid-sized organizations and have fewer resources to draw on to pursue a major gift program. Some are just really starting to think about it. Major gifts have been what people have given most in the past, not necessarily as you define how we might set larger targets. So for the small to mid-sized organization with a staff of 1 or 2 development officers that have a list of people who have given at the top levels for their organizations, how might you recommend that they get started on who to qualify first, how they might qualify first? I know this gets a little specific, but I think it could be very useful from somebody who has done this many times over and can hopefully kickstart some activity going forward.
So thank you for that question. Feel free to write to me directly, but I will say that is exactly, precisely the question addressed by the new book, Raising Your Organization's Largest Gifts. And it has a chapter on how you identify the people on whom you should focus for those largest gifts, on how you should cultivate, how you should solicit them, how you should steward them. All walks through all of the different types, and whether you're a shop of one or even an organization that doesn't have a dedicated development person where the executive director is the chief development officer, what you can do, what your board members can do, what the whole organization can do to identify and then deal in a slightly different way with the people who have the capacity to make those largest gifts, to make sure that the largest gifts are as large as they can possibly be. That is the whole thrust, the core of that new book. And again, I know it will be out in a few months' time, available through CASE to anyone. It will be available on Amazon, but in the meantime, I'm happy to take questions from anyone who would like to write directly to me.
That's great, Ron, and thanks again for a very informative, terrific presentation. We're very pleased to have you join us today. And best to everybody in the holiday season. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, take care.